Hello, kia ora, good afternoon to you, and welcome to the Manaaki live stream. In the midst of the lockdown, there's been some really interesting commentary emerging from some key players in the country, and they're asking some really great questions. For example, could this country's greatest challenge actually right now also be its greatest opportunity? That's what Rod Drury thinks. You may have seen the article he penned for Newsroom over the weekend. Rod, of course, the founder of the global small business accounting platform Xero. He is, surprise, surprise, perhaps, thinking in the glass half full space. He's a busy man, so we are incredibly grateful to have him here with us this afternoon on our podcast. Hi, Rod. How are you doing?
Hey, Rachel, beaming at you from Hawke's Bay. Nice to see you.
Excellent. How's the lockdown treating you?
Oh, look, it's pretty good here, but you have to feel for those people that aren't working at the moment. There's a lot of really scared people. But there are some positives to take out of it. When you see what's happening in the US, especially in the small business space, there's been a lot of money that's been promised, but they physically can't actually get access to it. So with these sort of global pandemics, it's, we can count ourselves lucky being in New Zealand.
Yeah, we can for sure. Let's look at your article, because what I took from it is that on the other side of COVID, our economic recovery strategy you think should be built around our environment, around innovation, around technology. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think we've all been thinking about these things for a while, right? But the normal process of, getting big ideas together, and for the last 2 years, I've been sort of thinking about, what could our platform be? So this isn't just ideas that have happened over the last few days. But I think what happens in these crises is we can compress sort of 10 years of thinking into one because we have to move. So what's really great is there are lots of ideas that we've been percolating on for some time, and the crisis gives us an opportunity to get those thoughts out there. And I think they fast track the decision process to make things happen. And I think what it does is that it gives us, and what's really nice talking to people is that we are all having a really full reset. We're spending time with our families if we're lucky enough to be able to spend time with our families. But we're really thinking about all the things that are truly important. And, for me, probably in the second half of my life, it's actually a real blessing to take this month to really think about what's next. And you can't help but be ambitious for New Zealand and think about what we could look like in 10 years if we make some hard and exciting decisions now.
Yeah, let's look at some of those key projects, because some of them are built around equality, some of them are built around the environment. So let's look at 5G first of all, because I know you applaud what's happened here with the ultra fast broadband rollout, the UFB, and you want to see the same approach in essence applied to 5G. Tell us a little bit about that. How so?
Yeah, well, maybe just sort of stepping back slightly and putting things into the framework. So what's been really exciting over the last 3 or 4 weeks is seeing most of New Zealand's senior business leaders have all been talking, and people like Sam Morgan and Stephen Tyndall and Rob Fife and the Mowbrays have been right in there thinking about what do we have to do right now. And through that process, we connected with Roger Dennis, and Roger actually did some work on pandemics, I think about 3 years ago, and came up with quite a simple but a useful framework. So what are the things that have to happen right now? So those things have happened. We've gone and we've managed to find some PPE. We've seen some ventilators being built, all those really important things for what had to happen right now, and that happened very, very quickly. Then the next thing is wave 2. What are the projects we can get started on straight away, because we have to get people into work as fast as we can, but we don't want to just make work. We want to do projects which actually contribute towards the big vision. So what are the projects we can do really, really fast and just get started? And then wave 3 is probably more of a discussion around what New Zealand looks like over the next 10, 20 years. And those are the big ones like hydro and dams. So 5G is extremely interesting because we can already see the benefit now of all that investment we put in. We're getting fibre to the home. And I've got friends in Australia who, in Melbourne and in Sydney, and they still only have ADSL. They get their internet over copper, and they can't believe the sort of speeds that we get here. And the really brave thing there was we kind of broke the chicken and egg. We didn't blur the infrastructure investment and massive investment of actually laying all that fibre with the retail services that you can put over the top. So that structural separation really, really works. So if we know that works, why wouldn't we do the same for 5G? I mean, it just doesn't make sense having three companies having to fund, 3 different networks. We're a small, skinny country. Why don't we use the Australian super funds and a New Zealand super fund who are desperate for these types of projects to bid to give us a really good rate to roll out that 5G infrastructure all through New Zealand, and then in the same way we've done with UFV, we should then have a whole lot of retail service providers that can build services over the top. So it just seems to make sense, and we can get started on that pretty quickly.
Well, and I think, you sort of said, and let's just, aim high, and we can do this. I aim to have the best mobile infrastructure in the world. Like, just put that down the line in the sand. I was going to say to you, how do we fund this? How does the government fund this? Because we're a little bit short on cash, but you reckon that the super funds are the way forward on this?
Yeah, well, exactly. So talking to some of the Australian super funds over the last 2 years on some other projects I've been working on, they have $2 trillion of funds to invest, and what they do is they give it out to fund managers, who in turn give it to Apple, Google, Microsoft, Alibaba, all those companies that don't potentially pay tax here, and also are creating short-term employment issues. So they're really keen to find positive infrastructure style investments where they can put a large amount of money to work. So say it costs sort of $3 billion, say, to throw out some towers. It's never been cheaper to get that. And if we put that in as infrastructure, then all they want is a 3 to 5% return, and they're extremely happy. And that means as each connection that comes on uses those 5G services, it goes towards paying that, and any super profits that happen can be put into building even more towers. So you end up just building this really good national network, and then that means it'll be much easier for new service providers to provide all sorts of new mobile services all over the top.
And we've talked about that as just one project, but and you've talked about wave one, that the flying out of the PPE and the likes of Tyndall and a lot of people getting together to talk about this and what we needed to do and still are doing in that sort of public health emergency space. And then you go into wave 2, and then wave 3, that 10 to 20 year project down the line. It feels to me like that's where we really start to dance. And I know you're thinking big in terms of renewable energy, making New Zealand a hub for electric aviation, autonomous buses, and why not aim for a 100% electric car fleet? Tell us a little bit about that, because and how New Zealand might benefit. It sounds fabulous, but it sounds positively Scandinavian in a way as well.
Yeah, well, it comes back to values, and I think values are really important. One of the things that we've learned over the last few years is that we do have really clear values here. So you can't do a project if you haven't taken the environment into account, but also equality is a really strong value here. It's something that's happened over the last 10 years. And again, you can't do a project unless you're thinking about all of New Zealand and you're considering that it's absolutely fair. So I think, when we look at projects, they have to be put through that lens. So what I did, and what I've been doing for the last 2 years, is really thinking about renewable electricity as a way that creates this platform that we can build all sorts of clean businesses over the top. And as I went through that, I found that our electricity was actually quite expensive. And as I started pulling the rope on that, I found that we only store really a few weeks worth of water. And what's happened is over the last sort of 20 or 30 years, you can't have a discussion about building any more dams. So you don't want to start there, because we know that's going to be hard, but you need to build the trade-off. So what's happened in the technology space is we've seen a lot of really neat things happen over the last 5 to 10 years, like electric cars, electric buses, electric planes. People are now riding electric scooters and skateboards. So technology is meaning that we can actually see what the world could look like. So now that we can, and I think when you say, do you want those things? Would you love to be able to fly very cheaply from Auckland to Queenstown and have no carbon guilt? People go, yes, I absolutely want that. So then you go, okay, well, if you want that, let's have a mature discussion about, should we sacrifice a very small amount of land, store some more water, which has a whole lot of other sort of benefits, and do it in an environmentally friendly way. So I think that's the two things. It's not just looking at, should we build some dams? It's saying, are these exciting projects that we all want? And if people go, yeah, well, then we can actually work with people. So I've been working with James Shaw and Eugenie Sage, having these types of discussions, and I think they're absolutely open to have those discussions. And the role of talking about these things now is so that politicians can see that there is a strong desire to do these sort of projects.
And I know too, in New Zealand was doing some work in this space about electric aviation, particularly on the short hauls before, of course, what's occurred with COVID. But they're certainly receptive to this, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's the future, right? And again, why is it interesting doing electric aviation here? Well, it's because we are the small island. Our longest flight is probably about an hour and a half. If you were doing this in Finland, as an example, you'd have a little electric plane sitting next to an A380 that's going to fly for 15 hours. It's not that interesting. But if we said, look, we want to completely flip our electric aviation fleet over a sort of 10 to 15 year period, people go, yes, absolutely, that's something we can actually go, we can actually go for that. And I think, once people think about that, you go, wow, that's really cool. Now let's have a discussion about storing more water so we can make electricity really cheap, which benefits public transport, flying, and all those sort of things.
There'll be people out there I know who are watching this, and they'll be saying, yeah, sure, that's great. What about solar? Would we not look to develop that more? You're focused more on hydroelectricity.
Well, because it's so marginal. We don't have as much sun as somewhere like Australia does. And the problem with solar is you have to also have this battery technology. And the beauty of lakes is that all the energy is just stored as water. So with hydro, it's the power source, but it's also the battery. So it's kind of crazy that we store only a few weeks of water. You really want to have at least 1 or 2 seasons of drought and store that much. So why don't we store 5 times as much water? But then if we have all that water, we can clean rivers, we can do more plant-based proteins and all of those sorts of things as well. So it's good. If we don't do big hydro, we'll probably do some more solar and we do some more wind, but it doesn't really change things. If we want to really change things, I think we want to store much more water, because that is our competitive advantage. We have rain and we have hills.
Yeah, I've got some questions coming through, which most of them are centering around tech. I'll throw those at you in just a tick. But Rod, what do you think the lessons are that we're learning about our economy in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic? What are the lessons we're taking as we're sitting here? I'm talking to you from my spare bedroom. What are we learning about our economy and the way we function from this pandemic?
Well, I think we're learning a few things. One is that we really care, and also that we are actually an island nation. We kind of forget that with globalization. And I think what's exciting is that we've kind of been the small brother to Australia, the small brother to the US, but I think our values have changed, and that we've seen with our Prime Minister, where we've had these crises, we can actually lead. And I think what we're seeing is this fantastic pride, which will allow us to say, actually, we're really keen to do these new things. And we've shown over the last month, the last 3 weeks leading to a month, that we can actually do quite big things, and we can actually play together as a team. So that's exciting. So let's take that, all those learnings and that desire to do the right thing, and get really bold on doing some really cool things. And the job that I have to do is to start, getting these ideas out there, get people talking about it, so that politicians can say, yeah, actually, there is strong support for those things. But these are real tests of our values. So one of the other things I talked about, which is more on the wave 2 thing, is a few years ago we stopped allowing overseas people to come and buy land here. And, I always thought, okay, well, I can understand why we had that. There was a lot of concern about the housing crisis, but it really hasn't made that much of a difference. And in my experience, the Americans and other overseas people that I've engaged with who have built things here have been fantastic. They've opened up connections for business opportunities. They've invested in our businesses. So if you take somewhere like Queenstown, where we know that the tourism industry, has absolutely fallen over and probably not likely to sort of get back, how long will it be till we have international tourism? Hard to imagine 18 months, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's longer. We just don't know, because there needs to be a global vaccine, not just created, but rolled out, even to open up our Australian bubble, that could still be 18 months away. So if tourism falls over, then construction falls over. So then I think a really important question for wave 2, which is much more important now than wave 3, is do we allow people to come in, and do we maybe create some zones like Queenstown or up in Northland or parts of Hawke's Bay, where we say, look, we're going to allow overseas people to buy their bolt hole. They have to commit almost, they can see some videos, but commit now to a $5 to $10 million construction project. And there could be a few $1 billion of new construction that we can get started. So that's super interesting, because our values of equality probably meant that, we wanted to close that sort of investment down. But now you ask the question, well, doesn't that make sense? So I think that's a really interesting thing. And, it's a good question for David Parker about whether we do actually allow 1,000 or 2,000 sections to be sold.
Yeah. I want to throw something by you, Rod. If you're a small business owner right now, you're listening to you talking about how you've been thinking and how your mind's thinking, and it's a big scale and some great lofty questions. What do you need to be asking yourself if you're a small, medium-sized business owner now about your business now and the way you want your business to run in future?
Yeah, well, this is something we've been thinking about really hard for the last month. So, the examples I've seen lots of businesses who have pivoted quite quickly. So lots of businesses are still absolutely going, and people are working furiously while they've got 3 or 4 kids making noise all around the house, trying to keep their businesses going. They're using Zoom and they're talking, they're still doing work. But those businesses that require sort of that face-to-face contact have obviously stopped. Restaurants and bars, all of those things, and that's going to be hard. It's going to be interesting to see what the level 3 rules are, which we'll hopefully find out over the next few days. But for many businesses, they've taken the time to actually pivot their model. And I've seen lots of businesses that might have been producing food now putting Shopify sites up quite quickly, actually going direct to consumer and really leveraging platforms like Shopify and some of the online selling engines. They can really quickly get their products to market. And seeing how that's been shared across social media, and how that's been the way that they've marketed, friends telling friends online and people giving tips online, those businesses that have used technology to pivot has been really interesting. And again, the expertise that we build doing this, people who have that expertise can export that overseas as well. So I think for all New Zealanders being on an island, we can use our great technology to take those services and sell them to other markets as well, and that's that's really interesting.
Got some really good questions coming in here for you. Start with Rick, coming back to dams. Have you come across a sustainable way of damming that doesn't impact environmental ecosystems downstream?
Well, I think that's the whole plan. There's lots of smart people who understand much more about that than me. But it seems to me if we store water, we're only talking about a very, very small, tenths of a % of New Zealand land. So I think thinking about where the best places to do that, and if you're storing lots of water, surely that gives you the ability to clean rivers and do all of those things. So I'm not just saying, look, we just build a dam and that's it. There'll be a whole lot of considerations, but the asset of storing lots and lots of water, there'll be all sorts of things that we can do with that, and surely it's better to be able to sort of manage the flow and keep our waterways going. I think a really big thing, as I said before, was plant-based proteins. There's such a trend towards not eating meat, and growing plants must be much better than than having tens of thousands of cows. So those are the sort of things that should follow up from a dam-based strategy.
I've got another one here. What do you see as the path forward for funding regenerative farming in New Zealand to accelerate this and to get the capital as well? Is that the New Zealand Super Fund?
Yeah, well, I think all of those super funds still have lots of money that they need to spend, and they are looking for long-term infrastructure type investments. And once you get investment happening in one end, then a whole lot of businesses get enabled, and more investment, other types of money flows in after that. But the thing that kicks it off is spending maybe it's $10 billion on dams, maybe it's $3 billion on 5G towers. There's a whole lot of spin-off as money comes into the system. More and more money sort of flows around, and then venture capital funding or angel funding or just normal bank funding comes in as part of a financial system. But the big thing is getting those large bits of money at the start, and that rolls through the economy. Oh, I think I've lost Rachel.
I'm back here. I don't know what that. I think that's not.
I thought I was going to have to start a new career of a stand-up comic then. So thanks for coming back.
My own little digital capability, I have to say. Out on the wild west coast at the moment, there's some pretty interesting storms going on. Never mind, got there.
I hope that's your primary house, Rachel.
Yeah, it is. It is. Here's another one from Brent. Hydroelectric is totally maxed out. There's only 1% of New Zealand's wild waterways that are untouched by man-made infrastructure, which has in turn had major adverse effects on our natural ecology. Wind farms and advances in cellular energy storage capacity is the way forward. What do you think about that one?
Rubbish. I mean, I've flown over to South Island. There's a huge amount of land that doesn't have lakes on it, and it may just be extending some lakes, putting some more dams on them. But, it takes an hour to fly from Wellington to Queenstown. I've looked out the window many, many times. There's a lot of space we've got down there. And, and I think if you have water, there's a whole lot of cool things that you can do with them. And again, as I say, you could do some wind and you can do some solar, but you have to store the energy somewhere. And, I think this idea of the best battery of all being a lake is just huge, and that's what we uniquely have. Australia can't do big hydro. Parts of Europe can't. They just don't have the hills. So yes, we can do other things that other countries can do as well, but meh. But if we do something which dramatically drops the price of electricity, and the secret is, like, if you think about what electricity costs, if it's water, the marginal cost is zero. What it costs is the infrastructure cost of building the dam, and then the more units that go through, then the cheaper electricity becomes. So the secret is not just increasing supply, a dam, but it's using electricity in a whole lot of new ways. So when I was, understanding why we're not 100% renewable, and I can't remember exactly the numbers, but Fonterra is one of the biggest users of energy for industrial heating processes. Coal and gas costs them about $45 per unit. Electricity costs them $65 a unit, or some sort of quantum like that. So they make the rational choice to use coal and gas. So we have to get electricity down to here, then they just move everything across. But our goal shouldn't be just let's make electricity 10% cheaper. Why can't we make it 10% of the price? And if we increase our supply by having 4 or 5 years of water storage, so we can get through any kind of drought cycle, and then massively increase it by aviation, public transport, flipping the driving fleet, and all of those sort of things, then electricity must get cheaper.
I think we've just had somebody who might have just joined the stream. Alex has asked, should this be paid for by government or private enterprise? And you've already suggested a good chunk of this could be the super fund.
Yeah, that's a cool thing, and it's because they need projects to invest in, and investing in infrastructure is fantastic because it's stable return. So again, the price of electricity becomes a price of capital of building the fixed infrastructure, and then the more units you put through, the cheaper that becomes. So if you're managing multi-trillion dollars of superannuation money, these are the projects that you're trying to find. And certainly talking to super funds over the last 2 years, that's I'm very confident we can go and raise 10 billion and build a whole lot of stuff.
Tom's said here, hi Rod, thank you for your time today. I've got a question. What are key focus areas SMEs can focus on in the next 4 to 6 weeks, do you think?
Well, I think the most important thing for all small business owners is to keep their staff employed. We know that the role of small business is to create jobs, and in these in these sort of crises, that's the number one thing. So it's looking at all the sort of support that's available there, and also looking how can you use your staff in a very productive way. So while cash may be a problem in the short term, can you be deploying staff in a way that they're creating value now, so that when things open up, you can go. And then thinking about how can you pivot your business model so you can sell more stuff, and obviously using online technology and part of those New Zealand-wide supply chains is absolutely key. So, I mean, each small business is different, but, the role of small business owners is to see if they can keep their staff, and then talk to people and get advice. Talk to your accountant that's familiar with banks and with lending. The banks are having a really good discussion now. They know that it's important to keep people employed because they pay their mortgages. So you need to be connected to your accountant who's understanding what the banks are doing, and they're all trying to work it out all at this time. So there'll be so much information over the next 4 weeks.
I've got one other question. I think someone's trying to tap into a little bit of your tech knowledge. There we go. Bit of confusion and delay in getting a contact tracing solution in place. We seem to struggle at moving quickly when tech has a role to play in government. How do we do better at this? Should the newly formed Digital Council be responsible for coordinating it? And how do you cut through the slow pace of government and bureaucracy? Crikey, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. I mean, I think it's all kind of happening. Jacinda's, talked about the various apps that are being built. There's obviously a lot of discussion in the tech community about Google and Apple providing contact tracing at a global level. There's a big discussion around the privacy impacts of that. I think New Zealanders will be rightfully more trusting of that. And again, this is a place where we can be one of the test labs, because we'll be one of the first places that actually comes out, and contact tracing is going to be absolutely vital. So I'm sure that our top technology people are having those discussions now, and we're learning with all the things which are happening. So everyone in those big tech companies are absolutely thinking about this right now, and I've been really pleased to see the Prime Minister already talking about these things. I think they really get how key it is.
Awesome. Rod, I think my takeaway from chatting with you is, we shouldn't waste a crisis.
Yeah, that's a famous quote, isn't it? But I think the best thing now is to join the discussion, make yourself heard. Tag your local MPs in, because it's really hard for politicians to drive change. But if they can see that people are talking about these things and there's huge support internally to be bold, then that will give them the confidence. What I hope will happen next is I hope we'll see in the next 2 or 3 weeks probably a group formed. Maybe it's the Digital Council that Peter mentioned, where we take a lot of these ideas and then quite quickly work out, okay, here's the work plan again, and those wave 2 things we need to do now to get jobs going, and then let's start planning the wave 3 things and see if we can bring those forward as well.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Rod,
everybody.
I know you are a really busy man, but thank you so much insight. And I think your words of, let's start rattling the cage a little bit and entering into the conversation, great advice to all of our SMEs and the country. Best of luck. Keep us posted. We'll keep looking out for your writing. I'm sure we'll bounce back and have another chat to you at the end. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.